Good morning and good afternoon, esteemed guests, Mrs. Ambassador, speakers and people who have signed up online. Welcome everyone to today's webinar where we will dive into the decarbonization of the SME sector in Indonesia and in Denmark. First, a minor practical detail. This webinar will be in English and it will be registered. A link will be sent to you after this event. We are here today to talk about how you can decarbonize your SME. We like to highlight the ambitious goals and solutions for both Indonesia and Denmark, and also to inspire for future collaboration between Danish and Indonesian stakeholders. This online webinar gathers stakeholders from both Indonesia and Denmark to illuminate the path towards a more sustainable SME sector and to create a platform for inspiration, exchange of experience, and knowledge sharing. The sustainability agenda is more relevant than ever. The energy and the climate crisis that we currently find ourselves in call for immediate action. Unfortunately, the SME are often overlooked in the green transition process, despite the immense role that they play in fostering innovation and building resilience in the economy. With today's webinar, we aim to focus on the huge potential that Danish and Indonesian SMEs represent in the green transition. Today we will have remarks from Executive Director of the Pitja Foundation, Mr. Ferro Fariska Ariananda, and Mrs. Ambassador to Denmark, Madame Dewi Savitri Wahab. We will hear about the Danish Green Business Framework and case presentations from Danish and Indonesian SMEs. A Q&A session will finalize the webinar. During the presentations, you can send questions to the panelists via the chat box. We will collect the questions and present them in the Q&A session. Please note who the question is addressed to. My name is Gry Klitmose Holm, and I'm a project manager in State of Green, which is a public-private, not-for-profit partnership between Danish government and leading business organizations in Denmark. I will act as the moderator today, and I will make sure that we get through the next hour and a half in the best possible way. Today's webinar is organized by State of Green in close collaboration with the Pitja Foundation and the Indonesian Embassy in Copenhagen. On behalf of all the organizers, welcome. I look forward to the presentations and all of the discussions. Before I introduce our first speaker, I would like you to watch a short video about the green transition. Please.
Do you ever stop to wonder what the future holds? How you, me, and our planet will thrive? Do we stick to what we know, or put our bets on something new? We want to build a greener future by transforming the existing into something greater. Some things bigger, some things smaller, all things bolder. But it can be a lonely job where hesitation makes time stop. What if we put our heads together and make every drop count? What if we turn broken bricks into new building blocks and turn waste into energy? What if we store energy in stones and turn those stones into homes to house us for generations and for generations to love. Let's light up new directions and make fuels out of wind to power planes and ships. Let's make things flow and partnerships grow. Grow beyond borders, grow greener as we grow our economies. We know what's next, and we have what it takes. By making more with less, we can make it better. Together.
So with this little film, I would like to start the webinar. And for the opening remarks, I would like to welcome the ambassador to Denmark, Mrs. Devi Savitri Vahab. It's an honor to have you. Please come.
Thank you. Shall I just start? Okay. Good morning, colleagues in Denmark. Good morning from Denmark. Good afternoon in Indonesia. It's an absolute pleasure to say a few words in this webinar. But first of all, I would like to thank the State of Green and Pijar Foundation collaborating with our embassy in Denmark to have this webinar. The theme of this webinar is very timely because for several reasons. First of all, the result of the adverse impact of climate change makes us to have not a business as usual. We have to cut carbon emissions through, among others, green energy transitions. This is exactly why we, Indonesia, as the chair of G20, take this theme, green and energy transition, as one of the important priorities during our presidency. Of course, this energy transition has transformed our economy and society. All stakeholders have to do a lot of things to be able to transform our society so that we can do and we can carry on the energy transition. As I said, all stakeholders, including, of course, government, private sectors, academicians, everybody need to be inclusive in order to be able to do these green transitions. This is why SME is important in playing a role in transforming the economy and society. In Indonesia, SME reaches 64.2 million with contributions to GDP 61% or worth 8.5 trillion rupiah. So it is the SME plays an important role in terms of transformations of economies and society. That is why this webinar is very important, especially in broadening the mindset of the SMEs, because as I said again, in Indonesia, SME plays an important role in transforming the economy and society so that we can have a more sustainable and green and energy transition. This is also coupled with the fact that our young generation, middle class, they are becoming more aware of our carbon footprint. So whatever the product produced by SMEs, they need to make sure that is more sustainable. Now, this is why it's important that, again, we learn a lot from Denmark, because Denmark with its SMEs has more advanced and more aggressive in terms of doing business more sustainably. I remember last year we have this briefing by Danish Industry, the CEO of Danish Industry mentions that he has been approached by many SMEs in Denmark because they wanted to be more, they want to transform their doing business more sustainably. So I think this is what we want to learn a lot from Denmark in terms, especially in broadening our SMEs in Indonesia, that we can be more sustainable. I know my colleagues who is going to be the speaker, which is Pak Fitrian. He has dealt a lot with SME in Indonesia and is going to speak a lot with this experience. I hope that this webinar can highlight the opportunity as well as the challenge faced by SME, lesson learned from, of course, SME from Denmark, and how they do economies, they do business more sustainably. Especially highlighting the fact that doing business more sustainably, creating job and creating economic growth. Of course, in the beginning, it's going to be more expensive. You need more capital, you need more technology. It's going to be more expensive. But let's learn from the SMEs from Denmark, so that SMEs in Indonesia can have a lesson learned. The other thing that I would like very much to see from this webinar is that the world, the global world, the business in the world has started in doing more sustainably. So I was hoping, I'm hoping very much that our business, small medium enterprises, business scale in Indonesia can follow suit, because we don't want to be left behind. While the world have already been more sustainable, more aware of carbon footprint, small SMEs have produce products which are more sustainable, then our SMEs are left behind. So this is why I think it's very important, this webinar, to have a lesson learned from Denmark. But I think also Denmark can also learn from our challenges in faced by SMEs in Indonesia. This webinar is not an end in itself, it is a process. So I hope this is only a beginning. There are so many issues that we can go deeper. So I hope that collaboration with PJAR, State of Green, and our embassy can be followed up. There's going to be another webinar, a more focused and deeper subject can be discussed elaboratively, comprehensively, so that our SMEs, especially in Indonesia, can be a part of solution and can produce products which are more sustainable, so we can be a part of solution, which is a global climate change, as well as more transformed green and energy efficiency. So with that, I would like to again thank you so much for the speakers, be it from Indonesia and Denmark, who are available. Make yourself available so that you can be a speakers during this webinar. But thank you so much for the participants, and thank you again for the State of Green for its collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. It was an honor to have you here. And now I would like to welcome our next speaker, who is with us online. It is Mr. Fero Fariska Ariananda, who's the Executive Director of the Pitja Foundation. Please, Mr. Fero, the word is yours.
Thank you, State of Green, and of course, Her Excellency Mrs. Dewi Savitri Wahab, the ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to Denmark. And it's been an honor for PJR Foundation to be able to speak and also share in this very important event. So let me share my video. I would like to greet everybody. Today I'm going to talk about the transition energy, especially from the SME standpoint. So please allow me to share my screen. Okay. I believe the screen has been appears. So today's I would like to talk about the collaborative governance to enhance partnership towards Indonesian SME green transition. So my name is Vero Periska. I'm the executive director of PJR Foundation. So to start off, we would like to set the context about our conversation today. We know that we are heading towards uncertain global future. So we see that 84% of respondents of global survey express a concern or worry about the future. This has been stated in the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report. So as we can see that we just get out of the pandemic of COVID-19. Now we are seeing an uncertain situation in the global geopolitical aspect. And now we are facing issue also in the energy scarcity and security. So not only that, we are seeing a lot of issues caused by technological and skill divide. All of this causes a very uncertain future that we need to manage. And despite all of these changes, Indonesia still have a very optimistic view of the future. So we are still believe that the Sustainable Development Goal of 2030 have to be attained. Even in Indonesia, we have the special secretariat for that in the Ministry of State Planning. And also, we also just launched Indonesian Vision of 2045, which we would love to become one of the 5 largest economy. And if we pull that to 2030, the milestone is in the next 8 or 7 years, we have to be the world's 7th largest economy. And this is quite ambitious goal despite the uncertain global future. So in order to achieve that, PJR Masa Depan or PJR Foundation trying to play a important role, which is to build the catalytic ecosystem of strategic players. So towards that future, Indonesia have several gaps. There are 3 that are very distinct. The first one is the talent gap. The second one is what we call innovation gap. And the third one is what we call a policy gap. All of these 3, we need to close it, and we need to work collaboratively with all the strategic players to close this gap. And PJR is focusing on 2 main areas. The first one is what we call future planet. So this is the world that we are living in. The clean energy, the green technology, carbon, waste management, future economy, and also food security. So future planet is talking about how can we manage the planet that we are living in, because we only have one planet and we need to take care of it. The second one is the future planet. Basically, we are talking about the importance of building, upskilling, reskilling, and also providing employability towards the people that will live in this planet. So we talk about the education, employability, and of course, well-being. So PJR attained that goal of building coalition of strategic player by mapping our strategic pillar into 3 programs. To close the talent gap, we have done what we call future skill platform. So we mobilize the expert and also industry player to teach and also to share the resources and knowledge toward vocation, university students, and of course, the civil servant. The second one, when it comes to closing the innovation gap, we have a program what we call Lestari Innovation Accelerator, where we are selecting, sourcing, and helping early stage entrepreneur, startup, and innovators to test their innovation in the large corporation ecosystem. The third one, last but not least, is if we have the talent and if we have the innovation, but we don't have the policy, everything will go 2 ways. So we are seeing the importance of driving the innovation in a policy. So with that, we have a program what we call a Global Future X, where we are gathering all the policy enthusiasts, policy advisors to come together collaboratively, sharing resource and knowledge to advise what can be the futuristic policy of Indonesia that can be that are predictive and also anticipative instead of being reactive towards what happened. So these are the three programs that PGR Foundation has, but the core soul of all of this program is collaborative governance. So in Indonesia, we have a saying, gotong royong, which is the Indonesian saying, a translation of collaborative governance. So the idea of collaborative governance is any problem in the future can be solved as long as we are solving it together, sharing resources between one another, and making this become a common goal between all the players. So we have successfully done this collaborative governance in the way we are managing the COVID-19 vaccination rate. So we achieved 80% of COVID-19 vaccination rate per mid of 2022. And that is happening because from all the layer of the society, from the high-level government official, from the business people, and also until the people in the community leaders, they are coming together to help each other to solve these issues. So with that spirit, we believe that that spirit can be also the core to solve the energy transition issue and challenges. So PGR Foundation will launch Global Future Fellow in 2022, which will be run in the 26th of September until 30th of September this year. So this is a fellowship program aimed to select 25 mid-career professionals to come together from variety of background, from government, from public servant, from civil society, academia, and also private sector to come together, share what they are doing, and also achieving the energy transition to ensure we are moving together as one. And when it comes to energy transition and the role of SMEs, if you look at the data, Indonesian primary energy mix right now in Q3 2021, 11.2% of the energy mix are coming from renewables. And over the next 4 years, the amount will be double. And a lot of the focus from the government will be poured into that area. So we can see more investment, more policy, and more collaboration from the government, and all the sectors will be poured towards the renewables. And of course, the issue of energy transition is not the issue of the government only. It's basically issues of everybody, from the government, society, community, and of course the SME, or small medium enterprises. In Indonesia, small medium enterprises make up the largest share of Indonesian economy. I think most of the Indonesian businesses are categorized as SME. And since Indonesian is really putting focus on SME, SME also become the part of Indonesia's green agenda. So we have put a lot of small medium enterprise into our roadmap, especially in the energy transition. So this is the issue of everybody, but SME is playing a very important and pivotal role. And the reason why SME needs to adhere to this new way of working and doing business is because the market has changed. The society, the market, and the demand now become more conscious, and they are choosing the goods and services that not only good for themselves, but also good for the planet. Means that the decision-making for the consumer and also customers are going to be influenced by how the practices of business is being done. So means that the SME needs to change the way they do businesses, not only focusing on the profit, top line, and bottom line, but they must also focus on the practices, good practices, and especially green practices. And in order to achieve that, it's not that SME is not trying hard, but it's that we can see there are a lot of barriers to SME towards energy efficiency. Several that are becoming our top of mind are, first, of course, the lack of resources, which is the lack of talent. The second one is the innovation gap, and mainly caused by the lack of information. Third, regulatory barriers. This is something that we in PGR Foundation is trying to tackle with the Global Future Fellowship. And last but not least is no spare capital to invest in infrastructure. So capital is very important, and we are happy to see that more and more financier is focusing more on financing the businesses with the good practices that is good for the planet. So those are all the barriers for the SME. But luckily, we in Indonesia see a lot of momentum here. The first one is that we can see that there is an Indonesia Green Award 2022, which is public recognition for SME progresses. We see more and more staff training for SME done by the businesses and industry leader. Again, this is the spirit of a collaborative governance, the big helping the small and everybody growing together, and there is no one left behind. Last but not least is we see a lot of guidance document being developed, a lot of fact sheet being developed, and a lot of practices being developed between one player to another to make sure that the community and businesses can follow and adhere towards a certain standard. And we have the common languages to ensure everybody is talking about the same standard of business practices. Again, in the future, we see that the businesses that will thrive is not only the businesses that focus on the top line and bottom line, but also focusing on the practices, especially the green practices. And SME's role is very important. And to close the remark, we would love to say thank you to the Indonesian Embassy in Copenhagen for their continued support, and of course the State of Green for the opportunity to share our view, and looking forward for everybody to join our Global Future Fellow program that will be happening in Bali, and we still opening the application until the 4th of September. And if you are in Indonesia, if you are Indonesian, we encourage you to apply, because this is a very rare opportunity for you to work together with different people with a different background to achieve and tackle energy transition issues quickly and faster than expected. So again, please visit our website, globalfuturefellows.com. So thank you. That's all from us in PIJA Foundation. And again, thank you, State of Green.
Well, thank you very much, Fero Fariska Ariananda. Thank you for this very inspiring speech. So, the next point of our agenda, we will move along to a presentation focusing on the Danish SME landscape and how Denmark's green framework. Andreas Utzon from SMB Climate Ready SMEs, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having me here, State of Green. Thank you so much for watching me both here in Denmark. Good morning to you, and then also good afternoon to you in Indonesia. I believe that I have my slides with me. Cannot see them at the moment. But just as a brief introduction to myself, my name is Andreas. I come from the Confederation of Danish Industry. I'm going to give a brief presentation on what is the Confederation of Danish Industry, also what is the pilot project that I'm going to talk about, which is Climate Ready SME, and then we have Climate Fit Production Company coming last. Presenter right here. Perfect. So the Confederation of Danish Industry is Denmark's largest business and employers organization. We help numerous companies, both large and small companies, with political challenges, but also with business development. And we do indeed help them with sustainable business development in multiple ways, both with networks, also with courses, with knowledge, and with one-on-one consultancy. So we are a large organization representing a vast majority of the Danish SMEs. Therefore, we were also one of the main actors and one of the main partners on this project called Climate Fit SME, which you're going to hear way more about from Flowcon also afterwards. With the financial support from the Industry Foundation and with competent partners, we launched first a pilot project with 50 small and medium-sized production companies that completed a climate journey guided by competent management consultants. They got a calculation of the company's greenhouse gas footprints, both direct and indirect emissions. They got strategic recommendations on how to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And then lastly, we got them recommendations on how to communicate their climate activities. So from these 50 small and medium-sized production companies, we took some learnings out of it to make an even larger project. And some of the learnings that we took from here, I guess you're going to hear even more about that in the next presentation. But some of them was that the challenges are to measure GHG emissions and also conduct a GHG inventory. It was to prioritize and initiate greenhouse gas reduction initiatives. It was communicating the journey, which we can see that some withhold, and then ensure implementation at last. So we landed on Climate Fit Production Company, which is a big and ambitious new program that's running for the next 4 years. Here, we're going to help all of Danish production companies complete their climate journey. It's going to be for 8,500 Danish companies, mostly consisting of SME production companies. We're going to use the climate calculator, which is quite unique for Denmark, that we have the Danish Business Authority, that they develop a free-to-use greenhouse gas calculator, and it's called a climate compass. So what we're doing is we're building a support system around this climate calculator. The support that we're building is firstly just to spread the knowledge around the climate agenda and then reduce the complexity that we do see that SMEs are experiencing. There are a lot of different things around with science-based targets, scope 1, 2, and 3, greenhouse gas protocol and everything. And we want to reduce that complexity. We want to get them an understanding of how to collect climate data, what climate data is. And we also want them to be able to use this climate calculator by giving them competences both to plug in the right numbers and use the calculations from there. From there, they develop greenhouse gas inventories where they can see where they emit the most. And then we want them to be continuously able to update this. We're giving them advice on target setting in terms of GHG reductions and also concrete reduction initiatives that they can take. Maybe it's going into a dialogue with a supplier. Maybe it's switching to electrical vehicles instead. And lastly, we're giving them inspiration on how to communicate their climate journey. Thank you so much for having me here today. I will love to take your questions in the Q&A session.
Thank you very much, Andreas, for your presentation. And now I would like to present Christina Kåre, who is COO at Flowcon of International, and she will be sharing the green story of Flowcon International, the green transition story. So please welcome Christina, who's online. Thank you for being here with us, Christina.
And yeah, thank you for letting me tell Flowcon's story. And I'll just share my slides here. So I hope you will be able to see them all now. So my story is going to be more practical. So I will tell you the steps that Flowcon has had on our climate journey. First of all, let me try to put Flowcon on the roadmap. Why can't I switch the slides? Here we go. Flowcon is, as you heard, a small SME, medium-sized SME. We work in heating and cooling control in buildings. We supply valves for this. And we're located in Denmark. We have just around, well, now it's actually around 40 employees. We have our own offices in Shanghai, in Singapore, in Dubai, and in California, and then of course Denmark. And we do 99% export. To give you a little understanding about the products that we actually work with, is that the base of what Flowcon has always done is having a keen eye on human comfort in building and energy savings, providing that comfort. So thinking this way is not new. What is new to us is actually documenting and communicating and putting actually the extra green angle on it, because we have always worked with building CO2 emissions. So what we actually started with is getting some awareness. Then we went into getting insights and understanding. We went into getting reduction options and reduction targets. We actually took the next step and took our commitment to reducing. And then we actually ended up reporting our actual results. So I'll take you a few steps of that journey. First of all, we committed to these 3 SDGs, which are earmarked for our business. So using the energy efficiently, providing sustainable cities, and taking a climate action. Then we also joined the Climate Fit SME, which you just heard about. So we were one of those 50 first pilot companies. And what we learned during this project was we got an understanding of the greenhouse gas protocol, and we got an understanding of the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement is about the global warming and how we will help reduce it. So that's why we have out to the right-hand side, we have 1.5 degrees and well below 2 degrees. And then for the greenhouse gas protocol, we understood the scope 1 and scope 2 and scope 3 emissions. Based on that, we decided for our process to take the cradle to gate. So our suppliers supplied to what we had, so material and how it was transported to Flowcon and how it was produced, and then our own scope 1 and 2 in the company. And as you can see in this slide, scope 1 was a little below 1% of our total emission, and scope 2, similar, a little below 1%, which means that scope 3 was around 99%. And having a very high scope 3 is quite normal for a production company. So that's probably around, above 80% will be in scope 3. Based on the Climate Fit SME, we got our climate account for base year 2018, which we published on our website, and I will get back to why. For the reduction targets, which we got information about where we should actually look to improve, was changing the room heating in our packing area in our production. We changed it from a gas calorifier to a waterborne heating system, of course with Flowcon valves. We also upgraded our ventilation system so that we could have the right temperature inside the building. We made a common understanding that all company cars, so the sales team and so on, would have A++ cars. And we went into sorting our production waste. So now we split it into cardboard and plastic and wood and metals. And of course, that's good for the environment, but it's also good for your wallet, because some of this you can actually get money out of when you return it. Unfortunately, our canteen waste, so from people's lunches and so on, it doesn't make sense to sort it, as the collection of the waste will be put into one truck. So that's why. So if I take the next one, our scope 2 emission, we changed all lighting in the factory, so everything now is LED, and except next to that, it's also motion and daylight centered. So you only have light where you need it. So if it's sunshine outside, you don't need the light inside. And if there's no people in the room, you don't need any light. We also put up 4 car changing stations in our parking lot. That is for personnel use, but it's also for company guests coming and visiting Flowcon. They can charge their electrical or hybrid cars there. We increased our production area and needed a new compressor. So instead of taking a similar one to the one we had, we actually upgraded and purchased one which is quieter, and it only runs on demand, which means we don't have any energy waste off business hours, and we don't have any energy waste during business hours if there's no need for the compressed air. And then, of course, we have to have attention on standby power on computer screens and so on. Scope 3 emissions is much more important, because this is a big load. I told you it's 99% of our total emission. And from that 99%, 73% is actually based on materials. 10% is transportation, and then we have a lump, which is others. And to me, this became very clear that instead of spending time on how should we actually send the goods, should we send it by train or should we send it by ship, it would make much more sense to figure out how can we reduce our products so that we use less material, because that is really where we got some fast feedback on it. So what we actually did is that we introduced a redesign of the left small valve up there, and we actually reduced the weight, being pure brass, by average 15%. Next, we did a redesign on the valve to the right, which is 99% brass, and we reduced the weight overall by 22%. All of the brass that we use in our products is recycled brass. So it's a total circuit. When a building has finished using the valves, they return them in, get money for it, and it's put back into making up brass for new production. So everything is circular there. For freight transportation, we increased our train transportation instead of using air freight whenever it was possible. And I would say air freight is of course fast. Train is not as fast, but it's faster than ship. And the emissions for switching from airplane to trains is actually a factor of 30 at least. So it's definitely also important. And then taking something positive out of COVID is that we actually learned that we could close deals by having virtual meetings. So we will definitely continue putting focus on virtual meetings. We're not going to see our customers, but we will definitely spend more time on virtual meetings. We also introduced VR goggles, which we use in training, or we use them in connection with planes. So instead of sending a person with a plane and jet lag and everything, transit and so on, we can send a pair of VR goggles to site, ask them to put it on, and then we can actually have their vision on site without being there, and we can guide them to repair, or we can guide them to service. We can show them a tech note or instruction on that screen they have in front of their eyes. So that is also really saving CO2. And then, of course, we are starting a sustainable dialogue with our main suppliers, and this will continue throughout the next year. Based on the CO2 base year climate account we've got, we committed to science-based targets. And at that time, you could commit to well below 2 degrees, which is a reduction in absolute values in scope 1 and 2 by 30% at least. And we will keep on monitoring and reduce the scope 3. Within the next 4 years, we will have to commit to a 1.5 degrees instead of well below 2 degrees, which means that we have to reduce our scope 1 and 2 by at least 50%. I don't think it's going to be a problem, and I will show you why. I'll say all the actions that we have taken has actually affected a lot of knowledge about Flowcon and a lot of attention. We have put on a sustainability tab on our website, and we have there our climate accounts, we have our SDG goals and so on, small videos about structure and so on. We have also developed our own total cost of ownership, where we can actually put in a project information, and based on a timeline say, okay, what is the investment you got back in money, and what is the CO2 emission you get out of this product life. We have increased our communication on social medias, and all of this has caused several interviews. I've put some of the articles up there to the right. And last year we were also nominated for the Danish SDG Tech Award in Best Company. And we ended in top 5, which we are very proud of. And of course, with all this attention, the Flowcon branding is increasing. Another thing is that we have participated in webinars, we have participated in panel debates and so on. And again, we have been posted or mentioned, tagged on other people's LinkedIn. And I believe that's because we do something which is special. For the next year, so 2019 climate account, we have reduced in absolute values scope 1 and 2 by 12%, even though we in the same period increased our turnover by 22%. And if I go back to what we committed ourselves to at science-based targets, we said we would reduce scope 1 and 2 by 30% from 2018 to 2030. So actually reducing by 12% in the first year, we don't have a problem in committing to the 1.5% reduction. Oh, sorry, 1.5 degrees aim and reduce by 50%. Unfortunately, we still have to look into our scope 3 because that increased more than our growth. And I know that scope 3 is of course relative, but if I had also included the 2020 climate account, scope 3 had reduced tremendously due to less traveling, but also due to the effect of the new products that we introduced with less material. So my recommendation, Flocon's recommendation, is to get started. Don't wait, this is important. Seek professional help if you need to understand what is Paris Agreement, what is Greenhouse Gas Protocol, scope 1 and 2 and 3, and so on. Start small, scale later. That is why we started with the cradle to gate. We can increase later, so on. Make it a management decision, but involve the whole organization and get it founded in your organization, and then communicate process-wise, not result-wise, so that people will learn your process from your process. So this was actually my comments. So thank you.
Thank you, Christina, for this very inspiring speech. I think we could all learn a lot from Flocon and your incredible journey. Thank you. And please remember, all of you, that you can ask questions for Christina and Andreas and Pharaoh and all our panelists in the chat box. We had some chat box issues before, but they're fixed now. So please don't hesitate to write them down, send them to us, and just mark who the question is for, and we can post it directly in the Q&A session. Now, thank you, Christina. We will go ahead to another case presentation. It is now we're now looking forward to hear about the sustainable path of IDH, the Global Trade Initiative. Please, Fitrian Adisaya, the word is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. Good morning to all of you. First, I would like to say my thank you to, of course, the Embassy of Indonesia in Copenhagen. Ibu Dewi, the ambassador, thank you so much. I was planning to be in Denmark, I had to say, but I've been away for about a month. For so many different reasons, I had to go back directly from my last traveling. So I'm here in Indonesia. So I'll be sharing my screen. I hope you can see my screen now. Please tell me if it's not working. And of course, I would like to thank you, State of Green, and also PIJA Foundations, and many panelists that have already shared their expertise and experience, especially Christina just now. She mentioned quite correctly the importance and also the significance of scope 3 emission, and how it is crucial to address this scope 3 emission. So perhaps my sharing as well as discussions would be mostly focusing on that. Decarbonizing SMEs business or businesses means that it is mostly about scope 3 related emissions as well, because when we talk about supply chains, of commodities, of trade products, fashions, apparel as well. It is also about how can we help the upstream productions, the upstream suppliers, the upstream farmers, and SMEs to be able to, of course, improve their productivity, as well as meeting the standard of quality, and of course, contributing to the emission reductions that is crucial. My name is Fitran Aldiansyah. I'm with IDH, the Sustainable Trade Initiative at the global level. But also I'm leading the country offices in Malaysia and Indonesia. So I don't want to dwell too much into this. I mean, preaching to the choir, of course, here, but just to focus on that we are having only limited of time now to address climate change crisis. But then, of course, adding to that, we are also facing, or we've been facing nature crisis at the same time. So it is so crucial to work together. And then, of course, part of these collaborations would mean that we have to help each other. And in these global supply chains, global activities of economic and trade, especially between the two countries, for instance, Indonesia and Denmark, small and medium-sized enterprises are crucial for climate actions coming both from these two countries. But it is not going to be straightforward. I think Christina has already mentioned quite correctly. I mean, the challenge in addressing the Scope 3 emissions. But if you look at further the supply chains of different commodities and different trade products, it is not going to be only like one line, so to speak. When we talk about SMEs, we have also to be able to distinguish between, let's say, SMEs that are really residing in the upstream, like those that are working together with farmers, with suppliers, but also those that are working together with the manufacturers, or they are, in fact, the manufacturers themselves, I mean, at really a small scale. And with that, we also have to understand the appetite, the requirement coming from the market. It is clear that, I've heard from different panelists today, that Denmark, for instance, and Denmark market players, they are requiring, I think, quite high standard when it comes to climate change and sustainability. And it is also quite clear to be able to address that. SMEs from producing countries like Indonesia need to get help. And it's not only about helping like charity, but really supporting them with technical assistance, supporting them with access to market, and also, of course, access to finance. So creating the business model for investment so that SMEs can be part of this kind of transformation would be key. Nevertheless, we have also to understand what sort of challenges that SMEs in countries like Indonesia are facing day to day. First, of course, when we talk about certain commodities like coffee, cocoa, palm oil, rubber, in fact, even textile and others, the productivity of SMEs and farmers in many areas and in many sectors and in many commodities in Indonesia are still very low. If you compare to big companies, for instance. So before even talking about climate change and how we can help SMEs to be part of this type of contribution to climate change mitigations, we have to be able to help them in terms of increasing their productivity, increasing their capability, so they can meet the standards of the market. And of course, then within that kind of package, addressing the issues of environment and social impacts, including climate change mitigations, or climate change or carbon emission reductions. And in many areas in Indonesia, for instance, when we talk about farmers, SMEs, we also need to understand that, in fact, even the basic tenet of organization of SMEs are still lacking. So land legality, for instance, they may not necessarily have that kind of ability to secure. So there's no certainty in the long term whether they can, develop and cultivate further at really productive level, and of course, eventually getting to the standard of the requirement from the market, for instance. Resource limitation. We talk about energy efficiency when it comes to, let's say, SMEs in Denmark. In the context of many SMEs in Indonesia in remote areas, in fact, energy is not yet provided, or is not yet there. The access to energy is important. And then we find solution in which they can use or utilize the resources that they have, in the surrounding area, and then use this as their competitive advantage. For instance, like developing biomass coming from the farmlands, so that they can use this also for energy generations. Biogas, for instance, combining with so many different things, micro hydro, mini hydro, and so on. So I think that's going to be also important to be able to understand these challenges and also try to address the gaps to support them. This is just a coverage of IDH in Indonesia. I mean, we've been working with several different commodities, so I think to some extent we understand. In many SMEs working in these commodities, the challenges are quite similar, and also the opportunities are quite similar. First, of course, improving the level of productivity, improving the capacity and professionalism of organization, access to market, and also access to finance. And then regulations, for instance, now have been improved. But of course, now it's about also internal professionalism and also internal capacity and capability to be supported when it comes to SMEs. But in general, this is like a mapping that we have done so far, that we've been working quite closely with the private sector partners, institutions, government, as well as SMEs themselves, and of course farmers organizations. You can see there are so many different aspects that we have to tackle and support, from the supply side, and then from the aggregation side, I call it ventures, and then from the regulation side, from the investment or financial institution requirement, and of course from the market requirement. Just to give you some examples, I don't want to give to go into much details. When we talk about supplies, for instance, like I mentioned earlier, it's about quantity and supply consistency. Sometimes SMEs or farmers, let's say, they can produce a ton in this month, but because of climate change and also the variability that has affected so many different areas in Indonesia, maybe the next month or the following months they cannot produce at that level. So even with that kind of things, we have to then inject from the beginning climate resiliency and climate smart agriculture or climate smart economic development when it comes to the SMEs in Indonesia. And of course, price. Transparency of price would also be useful to support the continuations of the development of SMEs in Indonesia, because if they don't know what they consider fair price, it is also going to be difficult for them to reinvest and co-invest in the long run. And of course, understanding the sustainability standards. I think that's why Madam Ambassador has mentioned that we need to learn from Denmark about the requirement, for instance, and then what sort of requirement that now is being regulated or being asked by certain countries, including Denmark, when it comes to different commodities or different products, and whether this can be translated and can be then mapped by SMEs and also suppliers coming from Indonesia, and how, if we see the gaps, whether we can also see the opportunity to develop business model and investment model to support or to address that kind of gaps. And of course, then carbon emissions, traceability, and many more. I think this is something that I hope, this kind of discussion and dialogue would be only like a starting point, because I think we can find good collaboration, and I can show with you and show to you, the kind of collaboration that we have done with many different countries. And again, when we talk about green transformations and supporting SMEs, yes, we have to find business investment models for them, but we need to have that kind of systemic thinking, as well as integrated ways to address different aspects or different challenges and different issues that are faced by SMEs, and of course, the entire industry or the entire sectors. So we need to think in terms of food system integration or sector system integrations. When it comes about ecosystem, for instance, is it about addressing soil fertility or conservation? Is it about water availability? Is it about forest deforestation and whatnot? When we talk about improving productivity, is it about supplying them with good inputs, seed and seedling, fertilizer, and of course energies, reducing the amounts of materials that they are using, and many different things. So I think this is something that we need to find options and business investment model related to SMEs. Just some examples, concrete examples that we have done. So for instance, with Nestle, We developed this kind of integrated ecosystem in which, with SMEs and farmers organizations, we identify the gaps, and also we try to address those gaps from the upstreams down to the, let's say, market requirement coming from the brands, in this case Nestle. So if farmers or SMEs are in need for a good seed and seedling, we create this kind of replanting program, so they can be provided with good seed and seedling, fertilizer and whatnot, and also package with them, supporting them with capacity building, and of course then processing them. So they will not only cultivate something and provide raw materials, but also getting the added values even at village level. And of course, with that, they can get into market and also meeting the market requirement coming from the brands. But the supporters, in this case, the backers, we then identify and work together with several different business entities. Of course, it's not only about government, standard and organization like us, but also like input providers like Yara, the financial institution like Rabobank and BTPN and Telkomsel Cash. This is like a cellular provider, and they also develop what they call cashless transactions and many more. Because then we want to understand what sort of things that in the context of the ecosystem that we are developing, what sort of things that SMEs can be supported, and then what sort of immediate actions that can be adjusted or reformed. This is also similar, but we focus in this context at certain areas for SME, also farmers organization, about improving productivity of coffee, but also attaching it or linking this with conservation or restoration of forests, because some markets, including Denmark, for instance, they would require coffee. It's not only having good taste and good quality, but also contributing back to forest conservation. This is from West Java. I mean, something that I think we can also develop and create some sort of collaborations with different markets, including with Denmark. We talk about coffee, but this is chocolate. If you can see, like Taucherry, Pipiltin, and many other brands, for instance, in Europe, they're also now sourcing cocoa or chocolate, cocoa beans coming from Indonesia. They are located in the forest buffer zone. But it's not only going to be then, the investment and also the market requirement of purchasing would then support the forest conservation, but also living income of communities, female farmers, and many more. I mean, this cannot be done only by working individually with farmers, but also with SMEs and aggregators in the upstream area, but also in capital city like Jakarta, or trading city like Surabaya in East Java. So that kind of connections would be crucial to support the development and transformations of commodities and as well as SMEs in Indonesia. Like palm oil is also similar. Big requirement coming from big buyers, but then when it comes to translating these big requirements, like palm oil that is not going to affect forests, palm oil that would contribute also to farmers' income, would require a good commitment and also good collaboration with SMEs in certain area like in Aceh, northern part of Sumatra, Kalimantan or Borneo, and many different areas. I think we have to then be able to connect that kind of requirements coming from the market, as well as linking with the SMEs. This is just another example as well in West Kalimantan, in which particular SME is being established with our support and also private sector partners, the off-takers, in which then we injected a small amount of money. It's around 1.5 million euro to start or to incubate this kind of businesses, in which then certain commodities can be cultivated, but also contributing back to mangrove and peatland and forest protections. And these commodities then are not only being assured that they can achieve the level of quality, but because of the contribution to forests and ecosystem protections, the market in Europe and in different countries are so happy to purchase more coming from these communities, a village forest of 76,000 hectares in West Kalimantan. So there's certainly a good success story that we can, and we have to scale these things up in different countries, different areas in Indonesia. So this, of course, then would require huge amount of investment, huge amount of capital. We can't only talk about 1 million or 2 million. we need to talk about, in fact, like 100 million or even $1 billion, because to be able to support SMEs, like Ibu Dubes or the Madam Ambassador has mentioned, 62 million SMEs across Indonesia. We need to have that kind of upfront capital, upfront finance, with also support with some blended finance like technical assistance, long-term off-taking guarantee, first loss guarantee, and also how can we structure that kind of finance, because it's quite crucial. Many SMEs, many farmers organizations are not necessarily being perceived as having, well, our financial institutions have not perceived SMEs and co-ops or cooperatives as part of a good appetite for their risk. So I think this is quite crucial to work together with those financial institutions, impact investment, investment funds, and many more. So we have trialed some of the business and investment models linking to rubber, coffee, palm oil, and different commodities, and we've been successful, but this is still a starting point. There are many more SMEs that are not yet there. So we work together, for instance, with one Korean impact investment, like this is Impact X with Instellar, Supernova, and also with Lingkar Temu Kabupaten Lestari, which is Sustainable District Alliance, to scope different SMEs across Indonesia, in which whether we can help them to be supported, to accelerate the professionalism of them, to accelerate the development of the business model, so in which they can then meet the standards of the global market, as well as contributing back to social and environmental impact. So I think we can collaborate together, I mean, between Indonesia and Denmark, and I'm so happy to be here. I think we want to see that the connections between trade and aid, as well as a business and investment model, would then lead to not only economic growth of countries like Indonesia, but also climate change or carbon emission reductions in both countries. Thank you so much, and I hope we can have a fruitful discussion after this.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Fedrin. It was very interesting to hear about your green work and all the great things you're doing for the SMEs in Indonesia. So thank you very much. Now we have reached the last part of our webinar. It's the Q&A session. And we have received some good questions from our online participants. So thank you very much for that. We will have our panelists online, Christina, Fedrin, and Ferro, and we will have Andreas with us here. So we have received some quite general questions, therefore some of them will be for more of you to answer. So the first one is from Alia. She is saying, during the pandemic, there's a significant growing numbers of SMEs in Indonesia. However, most of them are not well informed about the decarbonization, as they tend to focus on profit. Additionally, the gap of information mostly happened in the rural areas. Any best advice to improve the knowledge gap in the SME located in rural areas regarding the decarbonization and energy transition issue? Andreas, would you like to answer this question?
Yes, and an answer is maybe a bit difficult to give from A to C, but what I can do is weigh in with some of my thoughts. And we had a discussion here during some of the presentation also here in Denmark, that we have different definitions of what an SME is. So we see Christina with what we call an SME, but hugely knowledgeable around what they do in Flowcon, about the possibilities for action, for reduction initiatives. And maybe that can be a bit overwhelming. If you had say an SME which had 2 employees in a rural area in Indonesia instead, like how do you get that information to them? So it's important to be knowledgeable, I think, about the difference in which steps you should take for the smaller part of the SMEs, and then the larger medium-sized companies, as we see with Christina. So how do you solve the the challenge in terms of spreading information in an effective way in rural areas? I think that's a brilliant question. I do not have a brilliant answer to it, but what I can weigh in with would be that what we see in terms of mobilizing, especially smaller SMEs, small companies here in Denmark, is that actions matter. So knowledge, you can always spread knowledge, but there's so much knowledge to be spread. You can tell them about science-based targets. You can tell them about the GHG protocol, scope 1, 2, and 3 and everything. And so much more. The biodiversity crisis, you can throw that in as well. So to reduce complexity, I think is important. Come with some actionable insights, something that they could do something about, because what we see is once you take action, you will get more knowledge out of that action and you will be able to take further action. And as was mentioned before, we have a limited time frame here. So we would rather see small actions being taken and focusing on that than big information being spread with no action taken. I think that would be my best answer to what, and to how. I would hope for digital solutions. I think that's it depends on the Wi-Fi connectivity, the internet connectivity in the rural areas. I'm not really aware of that, but what we are trying to do with Climate Fit Production Company is scaling through digitalization. We're doing an online learning platform, so it's mobilized for all to just log on there and then just go through the whole course instead of mobilizing physical efforts. Yeah, but a really good question. I hope that was a sort of really good answer.
Thank you very much, Andreas. I saw that you wanted to say something to this, Christina. Also, please, the word is yours.
Yes, exactly. Let me point out that
Oh,
before we
you have
started,
to unmute yourself.
I should be unmuted. I am unmuted. Can you hear me?
Can't hear you.
I can hear you, Christina. I don't know why.
No, I think it's good.
Okay, good. Let me point out that before we were lucky enough to join the Climate Fit SME, I had no clue about Paris Agreement or greenhouse gas protocol or scope 1, 2, and 3. This was a totally new world to me. But it's important to get that understanding. And that's why I mentioned that get started, but seek some help in one way or the other. Get those words to be common knowledge to you, so you know what you're talking about, and then get a baseline so you can prove that you are actually improving. But do something, take some action. You don't have to wait until you have the final goal and reach the finish line. Communicate the process.
Thank you very much, Christina. And Fitrian, did you mark as well? You had an answer to this question?
Yeah, just thank you so much. Just based on our experience, I think you can't expect individual SMEs or small scale organizations or companies to address climate change. They're not big organizations, they're not big companies. So what we need to do, of course, we need to approach from two things when it comes to Indonesian context. One is a sectoral approach or within sectors. Secondly, perhaps within jurisdictions. So just to give you an example, when it comes to palm oil or coffee, we got this assessment throughout the sector of coffee in Indonesia. We know, for instance, what sort of challenges that coffee farmers and also coffee related SMEs would face. So with that, then we can share with the leading agencies, also the leading companies, and of course representative of SMEs, in which then they can have in our culture we call it getuk tular, which is like trickle down effect to different smaller SMEs in Indonesia. But I think we also now find much more important angles if we can work what we call with what we call aggregators. So aggregators in different areas, because we have to find the scale, economic scale of the options or interventions when it comes to climate change mitigation, as well as the issues of economic development related to SMEs. And from such aggregators, this can be, let's say, state-owned enterprises. This can be like processing facilities residing in those areas, in which then they can translate as simple as possible, like Andreas has mentioned, the requirement and also the expectations that SMEs need to meet. I think that's something that we have to be able to support as realistic and also concrete as possible. Thank you.
And Mr. Ferro, did you also have a comment on this question about the gaps in the rural area?
Yeah, I
Yes,
think
please go ahead.
the interesting case in Indonesia, where Indonesia is an archipelago where we have a 17,000 island, and we have a distinction between city and rural area. I think the strategy should be the gap should be bridged by digitalization. Means that the strong player, the people that knows about the cutting edge and also the state of the art of the conversation should spread the knowledge and leverage the digital, as many digital channels as possible. So webinar like what State of Green is creating here, yeah, is I think a very good example to be replicated back at home in Indonesia. And not only that, but we have to leverage also digital media like digital news outlet, and especially social media, because nowadays the Generation Z, they are not only consuming the traditional media like TV and also online media, but also they consume social media like TikTok and also YouTube and so on. So we have to leverage as many digital channels as possible to ensure we are covering all the spectrum.
Thank you for that answer. We have another question from Hanifa. She asks, in the future, what kind of cooperation will be carried out between SME in Denmark and SMEs in Indonesia? And Fitrin, do you have an answer to this question? How do you see a collaboration between our two countries?
Yeah, I can provide you with some examples I think that we can maybe learn from, because many SMEs are not yet necessarily ready when it comes, or mature when it comes to not only addressing climate change, but also even improving their own business models. So I think if we have identified options or requirement coming from Denmark for certain commodities or certain products, for instance, let's say we know that there's X amount of tons with requirement that you have to meet, including quality and also climate change related requirement, then this can be translated to sectors in Indonesia. And I think we can work with the Indonesian business chambers, Kadin, and also representative of SMEs, and we can understand like 30% can be then met by SMEs. But then with that, we can see also what sort of gaps of SMEs in terms of meeting that standards. So that kind of a program and collaboration can be developed at a larger scale between the two countries. But also we can pick and choose certain sectors or certain commodities or even certain SMEs. Let's say find 10 SMEs, they can be then incubated and supported and facilitated or assisted with certain upfront finance so that they can understand what sort of requirement that they can achieve, and then link this to Denmark and vice versa. I think it will be good to have that kind of exchange. I mean, the program that I mentioned with South Korea and also different countries, in my view, have been excellent, because for SMEs in Indonesia, learning by doing would help them a lot. And in fact, it has provided them with good sense of pride. Let's say if their products are being consumed or being sold in Denmark or in different countries in Europe, it has also created that kind of multiplier effect, so that other SMEs would see that this is something that is not only going to support them addressing the impacts, but also improving their business model. I think seeing is believing. That's the key. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that answer. We have another question from Kiana. She says, many SMEs who has kept their businesses going through a pandemic now face inflation and high energy prices, affecting both them and their customers. How do we ensure that committing to decarbonization will not further burden the SMEs that are already very much struggling during this period? What kind of collaboration can be made from the Indonesia-Denmark partnership, particularly in balancing the dreams of decarbonization and keeping the SMEs thriving? Christina, would you share your thoughts about this question? How can we ensure that this new crisis is kind of overshadowing the decarbonization process?
Yeah, I think we all struggle with higher energy prices and higher material costs and higher freight costs and so on. And then, of course, the inflation added to that. But that's one of the pinpoints when I said what we could do ourselves is to optimize the products that we are developing and supplying to reduce less material. So it's a benefit that you purchase less material, you transport less material, but the customer at the end will get the same output or even a better output. So I think my recommendation is to think smarter to provide a solution. But keep on your daily business. And then, of course, if you can reduce the traveling and do it online instead, that is another way to save money and be green.
Thank you for that answer. It's very interesting because we all know that the cleanest and the cheapest and well, the best energy is the one we don't use, and it's the same for all the materials, of course. So if we can scale down, it's a good idea. We have another question here. Do you think the carbon tax will help Indonesian SMEs to start their green transition process? Pharaoh, do you have an opinion on this issue?
Yeah, I think it will take time for first of all, it's a very great question, and I think it will take time for a policy to take effect. And I think all the policy is created based on a very thoughtful process to ensure that it's not only good for the nation but also good for the business. And I think yeah, it will create a positive impact, but it has to be a collaboration between all the parties involved, and we'll have to see it over time how the result should be, and everybody should open a dialogue and ensure that the policy can be adjusted along the way based on the reality.
Thank you. Then we have a question to Fethrian from Chut, who asks, how can Indonesian SMEs in remote islands of Indonesia be supported by IDH? Sorry.
Thank you. Indonesia is huge, yeah. So I have to say as a disclaimer, we cannot work in so many different islands in Indonesia, but we have our coverage consisting of Sumatra, mostly the mid to northern part of Sumatra, Western Borneo, West Kalimantan, West and East Java, Bali, as well as Maluku and Papua. So any SMEs working in this area, I mean, please feel free to connect with us. In addition to that, we also have been so supportive in developing what we call multi-stakeholders and also multi-commodity platforms. Multi-stakeholders, this includes Sustainable District Alliance, LTKL. I think Velo also mentioned that in the logo of LTKL, led by different bupati or head of districts. So they can also approach this, and if we think we can help them, of course, we will be happy to support, and also with our partners. And multi-commodities like Skopi, Sustainable Coffee Platform of Indonesia, Cocoa Sustainability Partnerships, and then when it comes to textile, Lantai Textile Lestari, and they are having different partners across the islands in Indonesia. So yeah, I mean, feel free. I will also share my contacts as well as these platforms and as well as other partners' contacts. So yeah, happy to help.
Thank you very much, Fitjan. Then we have a question for Farah from Chut as well, who's asking, how can Indonesian SMEs in remote islands of Indonesia be connected digitally? How do you envisage the digitalization work in the rural areas?
Yeah, I think this is a very great question, because digitalization is not only the job of a government or only the job of a private, but it's actually everybody's job. And I see that the government of Indonesia has done a lot of great work, especially to spread the connectivity in rural areas. For example, we have a Palapa Ring initiative. We are communicating with Elon Musk SpaceX initiative for spreading the connectivity. And also I see that a lot of telcos are expanding towards the rural areas as part of their job as state-owned enterprises. So I think that it's just a matter of time for every inch of Indonesian soil will be covered by internet. And I think we also see a momentum where Indonesian government is switching from the analog to digital TV, means that the analog frequency is vacant and can be used to transmit the bandwidth and connectivity. So I think all of this trend will lead to the spread of internet connectivity. Therefore, it will result in the penetration of digitalization, and it can be enjoyed by a lot of people in Indonesia, especially considering that the mobile phone penetration of Indonesia is quite high, almost 100%, and the number of people that have a mobile phone access is also almost 100%. So I see a very positive trend going towards the digitalization. And if everybody have access to digital, then it's just a matter of what information we spread. And I hope that we can leverage this momentum to spread the news about and the knowledge about the energy transition and also, green and sustainability.
Thank you very much. And unfortunately, we don't have time for any more questions. We have a time schedule. But thank you for all the panelists for your answers. And I will just, you can take a seat, Andreas. So for all the presenters, thank you very much for answering the questions in this session. And also thank you for your presentations. It was very interesting and enlightening. It has been fascinating to hear your stories, and it's also stirring to learn about the results and the ambition level in both Danish and Indonesian SMEs. I believe we have already achieved some very impressive results, but there is potential for a lot more. To conclude this webinar, I would like to sum up some of the key takeaways that comes to mind. SMEs represent the largest part of the business landscape in both Denmark and Indonesia. The current demand for climate-friendly products from a wide range of stakeholders, in combination with the high ambition level and agility of the small and medium-sized companies, underline the SME sector as a key player in the global green transition. We noticed that digitalization will play a key role in order to reach the ambition level that we have set in order to decarbonize the SME sector. We've already seen that it demands a great political framework and collaboration to back up the SME in the transition process. Danish and Indonesian SMEs has come far in the green transition, but we need to go further and faster. Collaboration, inspiration, and knowledge sharing can help to push the green transition further. And then I believe, in general, we tend to focus very much on large-scale national and international projects. It's the case in Denmark, such as offshore wind turbines, energy islands, power to X, etc. But more attention should be drawn to the fact that small firms can have large impact. So with these words, I would like to thank you all to have listened, the panelists. Thank you very much for having participated in this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much
Thank
for
you so
having us.
much.
Thank you, State of Green and the Embassy of Indonesia in Denmark. Thank you so much.